We'll talk more about this as we get deeper into the season, but this is something you need to know now, just so you're prepared for it, is whenever your seedlings are ready to go outside, you don't wanna just take them directly outside. Like, the shock from them going from an indoor environment to an outdoor environment is really gonna hurt them, and sometimes it'll just straight up kill them. And it's not just like, one thing that really helped me understand this and really helped me visualize this was it would be like taking a newborn baby outside in the sun just with no protection from it, right? And it's like an adult would be okay with that because the skin has adapted to it, but a newborn isn't. And a plant is the same way. Whereas a plant that is still like in the process, still little like that, has not been exposed to the like the UV coming from the sun, and that is ultimately what usually leads to the downfall of a plant is just over sun exposure. So make sure when you're introducing your plants to the outside, you're giving them just a little bit of sun at a time every day. Now, it's not just sun you got to worry about. There's the other conditions outside too. So there's, the wind and everything else, but it's really the sun that I'm most concerned about. And that's going to kind of help me dictate, not exposing them to too many other things too. So typically, what I'll do whenever we start putting our plants outside is I'll first put them outside in the morning for a little bit so they get some morning sun and then bring them back in. And then the next time I might put them out like in the morning and maybe in the evening, avoiding that time in the middle of the day when it's really hot or, depending on like what's going on with the weather here. But the point is I'm just gradually working that in until like over the course of a week or two, it's been outside, a whole week, a whole day, and it's able to be transplanted. And this applies to plants that like we're buying from a nursery, they're coming from a greenhouse, or even things if we were starting in a greenhouse, this would apply to that as well. So just want to mention that as well, because that is important. Good question here about hardening off cuttings. It's probably not as important, but I still would. But it's not going to be as because like cuttings that come from a rosemary, like those cuttings behind carry are going to be several months old by the time they go outside. It's not going to be like a tomato plant that maybe is only a month old by the time we're putting it outside or something. So and tomatoes usually aren't what we're seeing like the transplant shock from. This is like this is especially like the biggest things this applies to, honestly, for us is going to be like broccoli and cabbage and all of those cool season crops because at the time that we're transplanting these outside in Oklahoma, like we get days in the 80s in February sometimes here in Oklahoma. Like it can be really unpredictable. And if it happens to be one of those days that it's like particularly hot and we're transplanting out broccoli, or if it's particularly cold and we're transplanting out broccoli too, it can go either way, then that it's not going to survive. So anyway,
And
that's
Joe had a really good question about how when to harden off. So how many leaves? So I do want to point out these pictures down here below because you'll want to look at how many sets of true leaves they have. And don't let the let it fool you. These over here are not true leaves. The true leaves are the ones that just look exactly like what the plant's going to look like. So you can kind of see a little true leaf coming in on the biodome right there.
on the
But
bottom right.
yeah, you wanna make sure that it has at least, like, 2 to 3 sets of true leaves before you transplant them outside.